that would expose more than we currently can view that would change your model?
Uh, in the sense that we are jobs as scientists, especially me as an experimentalist, in contrast to people like Brian Cox, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Eric Weinstein, etc., my job is not to prove theories right. My job is actually to prove them wrong. That's really what I get paid to do, is to narrow and winnow out so much so that what is left is the truth.
Oh, there's a new champ.
Asimov. He said, if you think the Earth is flat, you're wrong. If you think it's a perfect sphere, you're also wrong, because it's not a perfect sphere. It actually bulges at the equator. It has properties, because the Earth is spinning, and the way it formed, it's a little bit like a pear, okay? So it's also not, but it's much less wrong to say it's a sphere than to say it's flat. Our job is to continually find the flaws, the cracks, that as it's said, the cracks let the light in. Right. Our job is to find the flaws in the existing paradigms, shatter those, and refine those. And there's countless examples of that throughout scientific history. So there are ways that I would be caused to doubt the formation story of galaxies. Absolutely. I mean, that's almost like predicting hurricanes. I just came through a hurricane to see, right? There's a big hurricane in San Diego this week, and it's like an inch of rain, okay? You know how we drive in Southern California, right? So even a slick of a trace of rain causes us to go into total terror. But we didn't know where it was going to make exact landfall, because a climate is an example, as I said earlier, not of something that's merely complicated. It's complex. The best way to simulate the Earth's climate is with another Earth. In other words, there's no irreducible way to reduce the amount of complexity to describe a physical system than the system itself. That's a notion of complexity. It's a definition of complexity. So in the context of what you said, absolutely. And people like Allison and others, Kirkpatrick, they definitely would be more thrilled than anybody to discover, we don't understand. There's something wrong with our model of how the universe, not how the universe formed, but how galaxies form.
So what I'm asking is, with the levels of detection that we have available, how significant is the change in what the web is able to do? And is it possible that, when we're looking, is it whatever levels of detection, whatever methods of detection we have now, is it absolute that if you go to 13 point whatever billion years, we couldn't have better methods of detection? There's no way we would get more data, more information, and would it change?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. No, I misinterpreted what you said.
What I'm saying is, is it possible that with new technology, we would get more information, we'd be able to see more, and then you would remap this idea?
Let me explain. Sorry, I misinterpreted what you said earlier. Stars, exoplanets, the atmospheres, the chemistry, civilizations on it can do so much cool stuff. Now, that's not my scientific, area of expertise. What I study is this: the cosmic microwave background. There are only 3 long-range messengers that can be used in astronomy. Astronomy is really hard. Unlike, say, biology. Remember in high school you had a frog or a cow's eyeball or whatever, you could dissect it. There's another frog, your buddy could do it better than you, and you should get the same results, right? There's multiple examples. You can do a control, right? You can leave that frog alone and then dissect this frog and then put formaldehyde, whatever. I don't know what the biologists do, to be honest with you, but when I dissected the frog, it came back to life. I was terrible at biology, and that's what became an astronomer.
It came back to life?
It came back to, no, I'm just kidding. So you can do a variable and a control. How do you do a control when there's only one thing? Universe. There's only one cosmos, right? We can't do experiments, but what we can do is we can make use of everything that comes to us in various forms. There's only really 3 or 4 different types of things that come to us from great distances. I brought some of those here with me today to give to you and to Jamie. So some of them are meteorites, right? There's a meteorite. There's a meteorite. That's going to be Jamie, so be careful with it. Now your birthday is the peak of the Perseid meteor shower. It's one of the best meteor showers of the year typically, so next year on your birthday, I'll remind you, go out, go to a dark spot, and just look up. You don't need binoculars, you don't need a telescope, you don't need nothing. And you'll see an average a couple of meteors per hour burning up in the atmosphere. Those came from parts of our solar system, or Avi Loeb, our mutual friend, has discovered what he claims and seems to be pretty likely is fragments of a meteorite from another solar system that could potentially contain alloy. In other words, not metal. This is pure metal. So this is your birthday gift. This is one of your birthday gifts.
Thank you.
So that's pretty heavy,
a real
right?
meteorite.
That's a real meteorite. Now, how do you know it's a meteorite? So check it out. That is a fragment of the early solar system. It's actually older than the Earth. It's about 4.3 billion years old.
How do I know with a magnet?
Well, so these materials are very, very unusual in terms of their composition of relative to things on Earth. Here's a more powerful magnet.
That's more powerful than this big one?
Yeah, look at it. Yeah, that's it. That's some cheap Chinese piece of junk.
Wow, that's crazy, the difference.
Yeah, check this out. These have pull force.
This is a robbery.
That was like, yeah. So that big meteorite crashed in Argentina in about 7,000 years ago. It was found by tribesmen and tribeswomen in 1500s, I believe. And they started to take it. And what would you do with a chunk of metal back in the 1500s, Joe?
Make swords out of it.
They made arrowheads, which you would do too, probably, right? So they just made it into weapons of war and whatnot. And then finally it was realized in the 1900s it was a meteorite.
How big was it?
It was huge, thousands and thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds.
Wow.
I have one big sample even bigger than that one. So here's some information. Now these little guys, I give these away on my website. These are much tinier little fragments.
Those would be some very exclusive arrowheads if you can get a hold of those.
Yeah. So my dream is to make these things into rings. You know how like Ryan Holiday has these like memento mori coins or whatever. Like
yeah.
So my merch someday, my dream is to make these into rings because they look super cool. You ever seen a Rolex meteorite watch?
Yeah, the meteorite surface. That's the stone.
That's it.
Wow.
That's the rock. That's the metal chunk.
And how many years ago did this slam into the earth?
About 7,000 years ago.
Wow.
And so
that must have done a fuckload of damage.
Yeah, it's a big crater, and that's just one fragment of it. It's strewn over several kilometers, and some of the pieces are even bigger than that one.
Wow.
This is a relative. So now the Argentinian government has banned export of it. So actually, you can't get these. So this is like a stockpile I have.
Contraband.
Yeah, I give them away, but these are fun. So we did an isotopic test on it. We found out what's the ratio of it. So these can only form in space. They have certain properties that can only form in space. So this is one of the 4 long-range messengers that come throughout the cosmos. The other one is gravitational waves. We talked about those earlier. Those travel at the speed of light. These travel 20,000 miles per hour, but it's pretty fast, but it's not the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. The other type of thing that travels near the speed of light, possibly at the speed of light, are called neutrinos. Neutrinos are these ghost particles that are basically almost massless. They interact with almost nothing except for other types of weakly interacting material. And then the third thing are photons. So you asked the question, could new technology reveal properties not about the age of galaxies, but the age of the universe that would cause me to question them? And that's exactly what I do. So our telescopes, the Simons Observatory, the one that I talked about earlier, it's a $110 million project, which will last over a decade. And that project is aimed at not just measuring the light. The earliest light in the universe is called the cosmic microwave background radiation. It's the leftover heat that was left over after the first atoms formed. The smallest, most simple atom, hydrogen, when it formed, there was still heat in the universe at that time. That was about 400,000 years after the Big Bang. So you can't see further back than that light, because that's when the first light is produced. Or you can't see light
Allegedly.
earlier than that. The galaxies that Webb is seeing is 300 million years old. In other words, that's from the universe is 300, so 1,000 times older than what we can see just with microwaves. But that's not good enough, right? We don't want to just see the 380,000-year-old universe. We want to see it at time equals 0, or as close as we can get. Because there's some people that say there wasn't just one Big Bang. There have been multiple Big Bangs, but there are other Big Bangs going on right now. Some say there was a single Big Bang that just emerged from pure energy. Some say that there was a universe that existed before our universe, and it collapsed. And the material that would later become our universe emerged from what's called a big crunch, or a bouncing, collapsing universe. And these are different models. My job is not to prove them right, it's to eliminate whatever ones of those I can with my team, obviously. And in so doing, our new technology, which is the most cutting-edge technology ever made, and might be the last of its kind, operating in Chile, which is turning on later this year, is going to start revealing the answer to those questions. And the way that it will do that is is really a combination of 3 different tools. The only 3 tools astronomers have: telescopes, detectors and telescopes, brains, that do theoretical work and make models, and then computers to simulate and to assess the data. We synthesize those 3 tools. We hope that we'll find new information. Will it change the age of the universe from 13.8 billion years to 26 billion? I don't want to say absolutely not, but there's almost no chance of that. Because it's fundamentally almost like a different type of science. It's like saying, I'm going to tell you about the age of Homo sapiens on Earth based on planetary geological forces. Like, okay, you can't have a person before there was a planet, so there's some relationship, but it's very tenuous.
Interesting. Very tenuous. What, if anything, can be done other than what we're doing right now to try to detect whether or not there is either signals from an intelligent species out there somewhere, or some sort of evidence of them in terms of some manipulation of their atmosphere?
Is she in stocks?
Yeah, this is obviously a big topic, and I really wouldn't have gotten so interested in it. I used to really dismiss it, and I still am. Probably you'd call me an alien minimalist, because I think there's almost no chance that there are aliens. Certainly, I would say there's almost no chance that there's intelligent technological aliens. In other words, it could be slime mold on some exoplanet Proxima Centauri b, but we never know about it because they don't have thumbs and technology, right? But I even think that might be impossible, or as close to impossible. As a good scientist, I should never say 0 chance they're aliens or 0. But as you go down the logical chain, as you go down the evolutionary chain of say, alien technology, as you said, could they be communicating with us? Well, we only know of these 3 different ways that they can communicate with us. The 3 things I brought here, the meteorites, they could send objects, trash. Avi Love thinks these are trash. He went to Papua New Guinea, he scooped up some of these little fragments of a meteorite. You should definitely have him back on. That was a phenomenal episode with him. He and I had a conversation, very technical, but I like to think I can complement some of the cool stuff that you do by going deep into the astronomy, so that my colleagues actually get some interest out of it too. But when we think about craft, now you're not sending things other than sending neutrino beams to us, or sending gravitational waves to us, or sending light. Those are all things that propagate near the speed of light. This is very slow. This is very, very slow. To get this here, that took thousands and thousands of years, or just orbiting around our Earth. But even if it came from another solar system, we have no idea where it came from.
Well, I'm going to stop you because you went way off track a little bit. You said, I want to be clear on what you're saying. Do you think there's no possibility for alien life in the universe?
I didn't say it's no probability. I think the probability is very low. And I can explain.
Yeah, please.
So, if you ever heard of the Drake equation?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Drake equation is essentially a parameterization of our ignorance about certain things in the universe, and we kind of checked off 7 of the terms, the 8 terms of the Drake equation, thanks to new technology, thanks to new telescopes. How many stars have planets around them? How many total? But there's a couple terms in there: the lifetime of a civilization, and a certain fraction of how much that civilization can dedicate its energy or what have you towards broadcasting its presence, right? So for us to know that they exist, they have to they have to have made technology for them to exist, and they have to exist in the first place. So how many of such objects are there? That's what the Drake equations really parameterize. Now, I propose that you should be able to do the following thing. If there's life in the universe, just life, slime mold, I don't care what it is, you should be able to set limits on it in the following sense. What I'm going to do is do a reductio ad absurdum. I'm going to motivate, hopefully I can't prove, but I'm going to motivate the illogic of suspecting that there are extraterrestrial intelligence civilizations. Okay, here it goes. Let me just tell you, my colleagues discovered that there's a planet, and it's around a star that's just like our sun, and it's next to another planet, and that planet's full of life, and the other planet's almost identical to that planet. It's almost the same size. It has a day the same age, the same length as the day of the planet that has just rotten with life. It's crawling with Kardashians and slime molds and whatever, right? Okay. So it's out there.
Just like us.
Yeah. And I said to you, Joe, what do you think the odds are that those 2 neighboring planets there's no reason physically they shouldn't both be identical? What are the odds that the other one should not have life, what would you say?
With the same environment.
It's same solar system environment, same properties. Rocky planet, had liquid water. It has an atmosphere. It has a magnetic field. Has all sorts of things.
I would think it would be more likely that it would have life.
Very likely. It
Yeah.
would be extremely likely. Okay, now let me tell you that planet exists. It's called Mars, and I brought you a piece of it here. Okay, this is a fragment. Okay, so this goes in order of expense.
Okay.
So this I give. These things I give away. That big meteorite is a present for you.
Thank you.
This is a piece of Mars. This I only give to you. I don't have one for Jim.
That's an actual piece of Mars.
That's an actual piece of Mars.
So from an asteroid.
So what happened was the Earth gets hit by meteors, right, all the time, and but so do all the other planets. Sometimes some of that material from Mars gets impacted. Imagine something that big that Jamie showed before slamming into. It's going to eject it from the surface of Mars. That's going to orbit in the clouds of Mars. It's eventually going to get outside the atmosphere of Mars if the impact is great enough, carrying some of the debris, the surface, the crust of Mars, etc. And that will then percolate throughout the solar system for tens of millions of years, perhaps, until the Earth smashes into it and it lands. In this case, it landed in Africa. That was recovered from Africa. That little third of a gram is a slice off a bigger chunk, okay? And not only does that piece of Mars doesn't have any signature of life on it, and we've been to Mars, we've stuck probes into Mars, we have a freaking helicopter flying around on Mars right now. It's insane. We don't see anything. Now, that doesn't mean that life didn't exist there before. It doesn't mean that if we don't fly into a lava cave, there won't be. But does it not say something? This is called panspermia. Something that sounds dirty, but it's
No,
not.
I know the term.
Yeah. So we exchange material, and actually, Sir Fred Hoyle, the guy who came up with the idea for the name the Big Bang, he actually believed in the steady state model. He believed that's how life was seeded on Earth. The fact is that we've been exchanging material for literally billions of years, from when the Earth was, just bacteria and Mars was flowing with water. We know Mars was rich with water. Now, the fact that we don't see it, is that proof it never had? Absolutely not. But I'm just saying it's a piece of evidence, and that evidence is very hard to come by, right? It's hard to prove a negative, right? It's hard to say that, Mars definitely never had life.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
How much detection do we have? I mean, how much technology is currently on Mars that's looking at signs of life?
There have been probes since, Viking and so forth.
How many of them are capable of detecting signs of life other than physical?
All of them have had
things?
some capability for precursors to life. In other words, some have been able to detect water. Some have had spectrometers that can detect gases.
Right. So
carbon
how many of them have landed?
Probably 15 or 20.
And Mars is, what is it? How much smaller than Earth?
It's about.
A
It's a little.
third?
Yeah, it's a little bigger than the moon, but a lot.
So it seems like a lot of space that we didn't detect things on, or didn't even
Right,
visit.
but isn't that the converse of the usual argument that I hear? There's 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. Many of them are like the sun. There's 100 billion galaxies or more like the Milky Way, so it's 100 billion squared.
Right.
The universe is 13.8 billion years old. So what are the odds? So usually astronomers will do calculations of following way. Instead of asking what's the probability of that. For example, I've been to Antarctica twice. I've been to the South Pole, which is, you would just be bored out of your mind probably, because all it is going out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean and freezing. There's nothing to do there. The coast of Antarctica is really cool. So this is a rock from there. They have volcanoes there. That's not for you. That one I got to take back because it cost me $50,000. It cost you, the taxpayer, $50,000.
Wow.
But this you can keep. This is from the South Pole's gift shop, Joe. That's a patch from the United States. We have such cool freaking scientists, man. Our country and the world. I heard something. I was like, I wonder if Joe knows this. Totally random, but just look, how cool is freaking science?
It's pretty cool.
Do you know they can measure? And I'll get back to your question in just a second. They measure the stress levels of whales, and they can use the stress of whales to determine if the Soviets or the Russians are testing bombs under the ocean floor. What the hell? I heard this talk recently. A woman studying whale earwax. So whales don't have ears hard to stick out. I know it would not be good for swimming around. There's a lot of friction. But they have these vestigial things because they evolved from wolves. I always thought stuff came out of the water and that whales evolved into wolves. No, they think that wolves turned into whales.
Really?
Yes.
Whoops.
Yes, I don't know. This Jamie Haspel, because I am a total ignoramus, but this is the going theory that whales evolved from wolves. So, like most mammals, they have ears. Those ears have been covered over. And what happens to a whale is that it retains earwax. And there's earwax in the whale. The whale doesn't hear with its ears, it hears through its jawbone. And that reverberates, and that's how it senses sound. It still has vestigial earwax. They sample the earwax of dead whales, and they can measure how much cortisol, the stress hormone, is in the whale. And they know the migratory patterns of the whale. Scientists, and they do some of this research in Antarctica. So anyway,
that's really fascinating. But we're kind of getting off topic.
I know.
I want to understand how you can look at all of the variables that are possible in terms of the composition of planets, in terms of temperature, in terms of also different kinds of environments for life that we haven't encountered yet but could be real. Different kinds of life. Things that are very, very alien to what we perceive of as carbon-based life forms. I just don't understand how you're looking at one planet that has a very different environment than Earth, even though Earth has life and it doesn't, and using that one example to sort of dismiss the possibility that in the insanely vast universe, that there couldn't be something that's very similar to the conditions of Earth.
Yeah, no, 100% right. You're 100% right, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying there's I'm ruling it out. I'm saying there's what's called evidence, prior information.
Right.
And you should be able to say that how likely it is. Like you should be able to run a simulation. Say for every time there's a planet that's rotten with life, like the Earth, there's some odds in the overlapping communal history of those two planets in a binary planet system that they should share life, and then you'll get a number. I'm not saying I know that number, but you should be using that as information to sort of say how
many champs am I missing?
How likely is it for life to get started? And once it starts going, I believe evolution can take over.
I don't know how to get to the stores.
You just keep, kind of kept this notion that because the universe is so vast. But the reason I brought up Antarctica and these whales, and I know it sounds totally irrelevant, but I've been there twice. Okay, there's 4 different animals that I've seen in Antarctica. Okay, and there are these giant seagulls called skuas that will freaking rip your face off if you leave it out. They're just nasty birds. Okay, there's penguins, and on the continent itself, and there's seals, and then there's people. Okay, so this is 1/7 of the continents of Earth. There's almost no other life on Earth. But imagine you could make the same argument. The Earth is so big, then like wherever there's a continent, there should be life. But you don't see cities in Antarctica. You don't see other, not even like other people. You don't see like, well, there's still Neanderthals down there. There were dinosaurs there at one point, but I'm saying right now. So just by saying that there's the large number hypothesis is that there's so much possibility that leads to probability. That's a logical fallacy. Just because there's a large number, there's a potential.
Right. If Earth didn't exist. But Earth does exist, and humans do exist, and Earth is rich with life forms. We know that it's possible.
That's true.
And we know that it's possible given the parameters that Earth enjoys.
That's why I say.
We know that there's an insane amount of planets out there that could replicate this environment.
Right. So wouldn't you then say, again, if you knew that life is so incredible, there's these extremophiles that live in volcanic vents 3,000 meters under the ocean. So again, you have to say, like, what are the odds that we would not see life on Mars or on Enceladus? And I'm not saying there's
but
no
it's
life.
just Mars. It's one example. And it could be that life requires a very narrow window that we enjoy.
Sure, that may be. But look at all the other factors that go into life existence on Earth. And we talked about Jupiter before. There are scientists that believe that without Jupiter we wouldn't be here because Jupiter is like a big vacuum cleaner.
Right.
There are scientists that believe that if the moon wasn't as close as it is, that the moon is exactly the same angular diameter as the sun from the Earth. Do you know what that implies for you? And next April 8th, when I come and visit you again, there's a total eclipse of the sun.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to take you, if you're willing, I'm going to take
sure.
you to show you the eclipse.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It'll change
Where
your
would
life.
we go?
We're going to go up to San Antonio.
Oh, nice.
We're going to drive. It's easy.
Okay.
Or a fly. We'll get to
It's only a 90-minute drive. It's not even 90 minutes, right?
Have you ever experienced a total solar eclipse?
I didn't experience it because I remember, was it Donald Trump that was staring at the sun?
Victor, give me that.
Wasn't it? It was him?
Yeah, it was.
Give me that
him.
Zil.
I was like, I'm not going to be that guy. I think I did try to look at it, Yeah, now that I remember.
But it didn't come through here. So anyway.
No, it was in California.
If you were to see it, you would the experience that you had on Mauna Kea will seem like, you know, like you're just going down to the bar or something.
Really?
This has changed your life.
Okay, I'm in.
This will change your life.
Damn it, we told everybody we're going to San Antonio on April 8th. It's going to be a real problem.
Well, we'll find a secret place.
A lot of freaks.
Yeah, exactly.
Freaks are going to show
up.
Okay.
But the reason I bring that up is because it happens to have the exact. Have you ever seen the far side? There's no dark side of the moon. There's a far side of the moon. Mm-hmm. It's riddled with craters. Guess what? Each one of those is a target. Is a Secret Service agent that took the bullet for us. Okay.
Right.
Any one of those could have exterminated.
Yes.
The fact that we did have a huge impact 65 million years ago that led to the advent of the mammals to replace the dinosaurs. The fact that we have internal terrestrial magnetism that then allows cosmic radiation to avoid impacting the Earth where the population is the largest of all species. The auroras are in the north. They're not in the equator. We don't see them here. The existence of plate tectonics, which is lubricated. The going theory about plate tectonics, I don't know if you've heard this, but that it's actually a lubricant. You ever heard of like dry graphite is a lubricant that like you put in guns or whatever, mm-hmm. but that the continental shelf is moving over these things. They think that that's a precursor, a requisite for life. Okay, let's do the following very simple calculation. Imagine there's 8 things. You're God. You say, to have an iPhone, you're going to need 8 things. I think there's like trillions and trillions of things. But imagine there's 8 of them, okay? Mm-hmm. And imagine each one, that the Earth has a moon that's just the right distance to have tides to slosh biological material back and forth from the earlier, and that has plate tectonics, that's 2, has a Jupiter nearby. It eventually gets hit by a Chicxulub meteor that kills off the big dinosaurs. It has a diurnal period that's compatible. It has a magnetic... Okay, let's just say there's 8 of them, right? Let's say each one has a probability in your godlike cosmic roulette wheel of 1 in 1,000 for each one of those 8 things to occur. 1 over 1,000. Now, if you take that, and I think it's 0, it's like 1 over 10 trillion for some of these things, right? Now, take each one of those. So take 1 over 1,000, raise it to the 8th power. You get 10 to the 24th. Guess what that number is? What? It's the same as the number of stars in the whole universe throughout history. In other words, one thing, only 8 different things that had to occur to make life in my simplified God computer that Joe Rogan is controlling. And the probability of those 8 things is only 1 part in 10 to the 24th. Then the problem is you're multiplying a large number by a number that's completely unknown. The probability that all these events could line up to make life. And you're saying anything times infinity is finite.
Right.
I don't
but
agree
can I
with
stop
that.
you? Is that? But we're not necessarily saying that. For first of all, is it conceivable that there would be solar systems that don't have the sort of asteroid and meteor activity that we do?
Of course, yeah.
So wouldn't they maybe not get as pelted by asteroids and meteors and have more time to develop? Isn't that conceivable that there could be a different kind of life? If we find so much variety of life, like we talked about the volcanic vents, isn't it possible that there could be other ways that life could form in different environments that may be hostile to biological life on Earth, but not to whatever evolves there? We're talking about an infinite number of variables. When we're talking about so many different planets.
But why is it that the large number? See, again, that's the Carl Sagan. If there's no life in the universe, it's a big awful waste of space. But that implies
I don't think that's true. I think that's
what he said.
I believe that he said that. I'm not saying he didn't say that, but I don't think that way at all. I think we're so silly to think that this finite thing that we call biological life is the most significant thing and something that we know is at least 13 billion years old. That's so insane that human life, which is just like this never-ending cycle of birth and death with this one particular organism, that thing is the most important thing that's going on in the fucking universe. That's so crazy. As much as I love people,
I know, but you don't have any evidence for that, right? I mean,
what do you mean, evidence for what?
You can't say that we are not alone,
right? You can't say we're not alone. But it's just the idea that that's the most important thing. That biological life is the most important thing.
I mean, I'm coming from a religious perspective, so I'm going to say that we believe that humans have infinite worth and that we're made in the image of God, right? That we have godlike abilities. So how many other godlike things could there be in the universe? Maybe and again, I don't want this said that Brian Keating, astrophysicist, believes that there's definitely no life. I believe that there could be life. In fact, I believe that there is life outside of the Earth, but I think it came from the Earth.
Interesting.
Through
like
panspermia. Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. You mean in the whole universe itself that it's come from the Earth? That
Well,
Earth is
even the most, and I think you had Adam Frank, professor at the University of Rochester, on about 5 or 10 years ago. He does the following calculation. He basically proves that it's likely that we're not the only technological civilization in the universe over the universe's history. And I love Adam. I'm like, who gives it? You know what he's saying,
Who
Joe?
gives it? Everybody.
No.
Don't
Listen,
they?
Joe. Listen to what he says.
I'm listening.
He said that that there was at least one civilization, with the probability greater than 0, out of the 10 to the 24th power, a trillion planets and stars in the universe, that there's been one civilization throughout 13.8 billion years. That doesn't mean in our solar system. It doesn't mean in our galaxy. It doesn't mean in Andromeda, the Small Magellanic Clouds. It doesn't even mean right now. It could be that life could have formed 100 million years after the Big Bang and is gone. So is it relevant to you? Like, it's unknowable. I'm saying what he's saying is at best it's unknowable because we can't contact the species that's extinct.
Right.
We'll never travel to a place that's beyond a few light years from Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you can say, of course, well, why don't we think that there are more laws of physics than we even know about? Of course, if we lived 100 years ago, we think there are 2 laws of physics, right?
Right.
So I don't want to be arrogant. I don't want to say I know for sure. That's why I will never say that. But I'm saying right now, if you had a bet, and there's some kind, you would make that bet. Yes, there is life, and maybe you even bet there's technological life, because maybe you believe that there's, that there are extraterrestrial beings that live within us, or perhaps there could be a possibility. You would say yes. I would say no, and I would say, based on what evidence can you say that there's life outside of the Earth? I'd say right now there's 0 evidence. You would have to admit that, right? There's no evidence.
There's no evidence, but a lack of evidence is not evidence that it doesn't exist.
That's absolutely true.
So when you are seeing all this UAP disclosure talk and all this stuff, what is your take on this stuff?
So I've talked to people, Ryan Graves, who you've had on. I've talked to, I actually did a podcast with his wingman, one of his former Navy pilot.
I listened to it.
Yeah, oh, good, thanks.
It's very good.
Yeah, I shouldn't
Great
say thanks
discussion.
before you said it was good.
It was very good.
Thank
It's
you.
very, very interesting.
I appreciate it. I'll put that on my resume. So we talked, and remember earlier, like 2 hours ago, I was going to ask you for advice, and I'm such a blabbermouth, I didn't get to ask you for advice as a podcaster.
Yes.
The advice I want to ask you is when you're talking to somebody, and for one reason or another, maybe it's your past history, maybe it's research that you've done independently that even an expert hasn't done, and you're thinking this person's wrong, or this person's making a mistake. Has that ever happened to you? And if so, how do you deal with that as a podcaster?
It's complicated. I mean, I always do, or try to do my very best to let someone express himself fully before I interject. But there are some times we have to say that's not true. That this is not, what you're saying has been disproven, and this is like we should show how it's been disproven. Or, you could be talking about something that I'm an expert in. Like if someone wants to like from UFC, for example, if somebody wants to say, no, if you wanted to fight in the UFC, all you need to do is learn Kung Fu. If someone said that, and I would be like, you're out of your mind.
Or it's as fake as wrestling, right?
Yeah.
You could say you're totally full.
Well, that's someone that's delusional. But I mean, anybody who watches the fights, they know it's real. But if someone had like this very distorted perspective on something that I know a lot about, maybe I would be like, that you shouldn't say that because this is why that's not accurate.
So I'm talking to Ryan Graves, and I've talked to Lieutenant Ann Dietrich, who is the wing woman, I guess you'd say, of Commander David Fravor, who I've talked to them, and I've talked to them. Okay, look, I'm a pilot. I fly little Cessnas around. It's not going to be like, I'm talking to Super Hornet pilots. I'm like a schmuck, right? But, when you see things like, I'm told, like, I can't question them because I didn't serve in the military, or they have great hand-eye coordination, or they're trained observers. I actually know. My flight instructor told me a couple. He said to me, you relying on hand-eye coordination, are you relying on your innate abilities as a pilot, or your ability to perceive things is going to get you killed? And he wasn't like some military pilot. I don't know what my stepfather was, but the point being, you're trained to ignore your senses and pay attention to your instruments. Therefore, the human factor is irrelevant. Like the fact that he can land on an F-18 on a carrier at night in the middle of a typhoon doesn't have anything to do with the fact that like he is not necessarily better at judging evidence versus me as a scientist or even as a layperson. Okay. So we're talking, and then I hear things like, well, he witnessed this, or he saw this, or he has data about this. And by the way, he's been to my house. I've had him for Shabbat dinner, and I like Ryan a lot, and I like Ann Dietrich, and Fravor sounds really great. When you hear them say things, and then they will say things like you and Eric talked about, okay? They're defying the laws of physics, or these things cannot occur within what we understand about physics.
Right.
They're not physicists, and I'm not a pilot, okay? But we can use our various skills. When I see things like, he saw this, no, he didn't see it. He didn't claim to see it. And even in your interview, Ryan Graves did not see anything with his eyes. He saw things on radar with a system that was newly upgraded in the Super Hornet Mark D that he was flying, okay? Recently upgraded.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Fravor and Dietrich, when they were flying, they saw things and they tried to perceive them from great altitude, something the size of a school bus, and how fast it was moving relative to the ground. Okay, and there's data. And there's things from the Princeton. So I've looked into these things. I know the limitations. I know an awful lot about radio technology, radar sensing. So I don't think that being a military pilot, as much as I don't have the balls to do what any of them do, and I never had the guts to sign up to the military, though I might have liked to, doesn't mean that we accept what they say uncritically. And in Ryan's case, I find it unpersuasive. I don't mean to say that it's not important. It's very important. It's very significant what he's doing. Because I think at best, at worst rather, it could save the lives of pilots. If it's some Chinese spying balloon, it could be an American psyop. It could be doing all sorts of things. Or Grush. I don't know if you've talked to him. I haven't talked to him. Claiming non-human biologics, which is a non-cow animal. Okay, what is that? What does that mean? Is a slime mold my favorite thing?
What did you think of the Fravor video evidence?
So this is the Tic Tac or the
yeah.
So this is going back to 2004. And by the way, all these things occur in military. Preponderance of them occur in military areas.
Very important point.
What's happening with Ryan, and I've flown through that area. You can fly through it. If I take up my little Cessna, I will fly you through this warning area. It's not some like secret thing where Area 51 is blowing up stuff or nuking alien artifacts.
Is there restricted airspace out there though? You're not.
It's a warning area, which means that if you go into it, you could be intercepted, but for fun, and not for fun, for training. So what an F-18 will do?
Oh Jesus Christ! They're gonna practice on you? Oh my God!
That's how they train their radar systems.
Oh my God! They're gonna practice on you if you fly your little fucking propeller plane. Do you know how horrifying that would be? If those dudes just buzzed up on you in a fighter jet.
Serious killers.
Oh my God, and those things are so fucking fast.
They're fast.
I flew with the Blue Angels once.
You did?
Yeah, it was amazing.
Awesome.
It was amazing.
Did you puke?
Yeah, I did. I did puke.
I
did puke, and I was so embarrassed because I'd gotten through 7.5 Gs, and I made it. From hooking. The thing you do. We go hook. You're forcing blood into your brain, and I did that at 7.5 Gs, and then I failed to do it on a lesser turn. And I blacked out.
You blacked out.
Yeah,
Tito Ortiz.
I just fucked up. It wasn't like his was crazy. He was in one of those
centrifuges.
That thing's insane. What I did was I could have survived that one easily. It was not as bad, but I didn't do it in time.
Yeah.
And it was like it came upon me so quick, and then when I came out of it, I threw up.
This guy Hazard Lee he's got a good.
It's wild because it's like an elevator door. You see the black closing on the sides. Like literally like an elevator door, and it's almost like you're forcing the door.
Like a migraine.
When you're doing that, you're forcing that blood into your head, and it keeps you conscious.
Have you ever been knocked out?
No, never been unconscious.
That's wild.
Yeah,
I haven't either, thankfully. But
my
kids are getting bigger.
Everybody can be. I just haven't been hit the right way by the right person.
That's right.
But I've seen a lot of them.
Yeah.
But the point is that like that, if you're dealing with like that kind of speed is fucking insane.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing that they're describing, that Ryan Graves is describing, is something that's able to stay stationary at 120 knots of wind. The thing that the Commander Fravor and what their radar detected was that this thing had gone from 50,000 feet to 50 feet in a second.
Okay. So what would happen if that happened? You're actually holding right over there. What would happen if that happened? You had any kind of material
right
traveling through the Earth's atmosphere
right.
at such a speed would be at least illuminated and at least probably be incinerated. But okay, so then the argument becomes, well, maybe they have advanced metamaterials that we don't have access to. Okay, so you can keep adding things onto it, which is exactly, by the way, what this guy Gupta and the Galaxy thing did. He keeps adding, if you keep adding parameters to your theory in order to make it fit observations that otherwise don't comply.
Yeah, but observations backed by data. And this data is from these very advanced military detection systems that did detect this physical object that was witnessed by 2 fighter jets. Isn't another possibility that there's some method of propulsion that it's not propulsion at all. Instead, it's manipulating gravity, manipulating whatever the fuck it's doing to go from one point in space to another point in space almost instantaneously, but not biological. Not like a physical thing inside of it. I'm talking about like a drone.
Okay, so the reason you've heard, or I mentioned this Chicxulub, which is the meteor crater off the Yucatan Peninsula, that was the theory in which that was kind of unveiled, was a physicist, nuclear physicist, Nobel Prize winner named Luis Alvarez, who plays a small role in Oppenheimer, that you'll see. And that he was responsible for radar in the World War II as part of one of his jobs. And he realized something that they could do. So radar works by interrogating an object with radio frequency waves that travel at the speed of light and bounce off an object, and you can get timing between when they get bounced off and when it comes back, and you can measure the distance to them, and you can measure the speed if you get a couple of those measurements. That's how radar works. And it's totally similar in concept to what you described with the advanced military instrument. Luis Alvarez was a creative, incredibly brilliant scientist. When he was working on that plan, he knew that the Germans and the Japanese could have similar technology. And in fact, they were starting to develop it. It turns out the Allies were good at not only the Manhattan Project, but they were good at developing radar, and both were the technologies that were crucial. But the Germans were developing it too. He realized that there's something called the inverse square law, which is that the signal gets weaker, not as the distance away from it, but it gets diminished by the distance to the second power. Meaning that if, as you go away from something, the gravitational force that you feel, if I double the distance, is 4 times lower. That's Newton's law of gravity. The gravity force decreases as inverse square. It also holds for radar reflections. So Alvarez said, I could spoof the Germans by intentionally, when they send me a signal, I'm going to send them a signal when I'm coming closer to them. I'm going to take their signal, I'm going to diminish it, I'm going to shoot it back exactly as the inverse square, because he knew how far away they were too. So he spoofed them. And he transmitted the signal, so even though he was getting closer, they thought, oh, nothing to worry about, he's getting farther away. And then the planes would blow up the radar sites, and then they'd be blown. Okay, and now, that's just one example. Now, what would the German radar operator have said? That object defied the laws of physics. It was getting closer, but my radar showed it getting farther away. I'm not saying that's what happened, Joe, but haven't I provoked a little bit of a doubt that maybe there could be other explanations other than alien technology? In other words, you combine...
I don't necessarily think it's alien.
What do you think it is?
There you
I
go.
think it's... No, I think there's a real issue with it being in these areas of heavy military activity. And I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that the United States has developed some black ops secret project where they've figured out a way to do something with drones that's unprecedented.
Right.
That I think... When they're talking about it openly, as soon as they start talking about it openly, crafts out of this world, I smell bullshit. Like I've said it multiple times in the show.
Holy shit.
There's something about this that doesn't feel real. And I also gave myself the possibility that maybe if disclosure did happen, it would be so preposterous and so strange and alien just in the idea that there's a life outside this planet and that it's more advanced than us and that it's been visiting us forever. Maybe that would feel so fake because it's so crazy that it's almost impossible. There would be no context other than fiction movies. So like I wouldn't be able to fit it in anywhere, and it would seem fake. But that's not what I'm getting at. Because when I'm watching all this, I'm like, man, I feel like someone's lying to me. I feel like I'm being duped.
How do you miss that?
I don't know why.
You know what really spoke to me, and I felt sorry because, again, I haven't met Fravor, and he seems like a patriot, and again, he's got bigger balls than I do. When he got back to the carrier, do you know what they kept doing?
Yeah, they're fucking with him, saying he saw UFOs. But a lot of those guys had seen them, and they'd not just seen them like one time. They'd seen many of them. And I just have this idea that if they were going to do something with some really advanced shit. Wouldn't they do in restricted airspace where the fucking military operates all the time? Of course, they would, like, is it weird that it's happening off the coast of Virginia and also off the coast of San Diego, where it's massive
areas?
Yeah, I mean, this is like, it seems to me that that's more likely. But then again, then there's these instances of people encountering these things, and the concept of interdimensional travel, whatever that means, whatever interdimensional travel. I know Rush tried to sort of explain that in some sort of strange way. And physicists pulled it apart and said, doesn't make sense, that's not how it works. But the concept of exposing other, like, wasn't there some, what was this? Let me find, there's something I saved that I wanted to bring up with you. There's some, God, was it like a new, I'll find it.
Okay.
But the point being that there was some new discovery that could lead to the possibility of travel to other dimensions, or at least detecting other dimensions in a method where you could conceivably prove that there is something else outside of what we're physically capable of experiencing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And
In
that
fact,
beings could come from there.
okay, that's
where it gets, that's next level.
That's a wormhole too far.
Yeah.
But it is true. In fact, when I said the inverse square law, that is a very, very accurate way. Yeah, sure. I'll just talk about this. But in a higher dimensional space than 3 spatial dimensions plus 1 time dimension that we enjoy, the light and gravity would decrease with an exponent greater than 2. And so these black holes that crash together and release gravitational energy, again, like David's particle, they've been able to set limits on the dimensionality of space-time, and it's very, very close to 3 dimensions of space, and from an object that's 1 billion light years away, Joe. So yes, beyond that, anything goes. And but go ahead with your.
I sent it to
research.
Jamie. This is the thing. It's definitely not my research. Fucking pop-ups. New force of nature scientists close in on a 5th force.
Oh, yeah.
So what is this? They discover mysterious subatomic particles disobeying the laws of physics.
I just want to look at your face when you get incredibly let down. Okay, here we go.
Yes, let me down.
So when we talk about forces of nature, so there's 4 main forces of nature: gravity, that we're familiar with, right? And then there's the electric force, and then there's the magnetic force, and then there's 2 types of nuclear force.
My knee is about to be done.
Force, that's like radioactive decay. And
Just
then
leaning
strong
back and I
nuclear
must
force,
pop
that's
right out of
responsible for
place.
things like fusion and so forth. When we look at these particles, we say for each type of force,
Right.
there's a
I gotta get my
corresponding
muffins.
object that responds to that force. Say it could be mass, like matter, like we're made up of, and there's a boson, and the boson communicates the force to that massive object. So the Higgs boson is what gives particles mass, and that's the mechanism by which we acquire mass and inertia, resistance to motion. Electricity and magnetism, they're communicated by a boson called the photon. The photon is the gauge carrying force that propagates the interaction between magnetic fields, electric fields, charges. And then there's strong and weak nuclear forces. We don't have to get into those. This is saying that there seems to be a new calculation, new data that's been discovered in what are called muons. And these muons have a relationship between their charge and their spin. And that charge-spin relationship, for one reason or another, should be exactly in a ratio of 2. So their spin versus their magnetic type of property to their spin. And so this little dreidel, one of your last pieces of gifts here. So there it goes there. Not a dreidel. It's a top. See how long you can get that to spin for. Okay, so what they're showing is that, so see how the thing is not only spinning on its axis, but the axis is moving around, Joe?
Yes.
That's called precession. That precession for a muon, you can think of as a little tiny spinning top also, and that will have a special relationship between its magnetic properties as it's spinning to its physical angular momentum, which is what this thing is doing.
It's like the precession of the equinoxes.
Exactly wrong. No, it's yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
It's still going.
No, it's true. Yeah. Okay, and now I'm going to do something else for you. Okay, so you got that to spin for I will give you $100,000 if you can get this thing to spin in both directions over 20 times.
This thing?
This thing. That's all I want you to do. So
What is
each
this?
direction.
What is this thing?
It doesn't matter what it is, Joe. I found it in a crashed UFO.
20 times.
No, that didn't count. You can keep trying. I'll give you as many tries as you want. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now do the other way. Try it again.
What's the best way to do it?
I'm not going to tell you. Spotify money. That was the original way you did it. Now do it the other way. Do it counterclockwise. Can't do it.
Why is that?
Look at it. Is it symmetrical? Isn't that cool? It's just a simple. There's nothing crazy about it. It's called a rattleback. That thing has symmetry about more than one axis, such that when you spin it in the direction clockwise, it'll spin forever, like the dreidel. But if you try to spin it the other way, it stops and goes back because there's torque being.
That is the other way.
Wait, that's the first way. Now do it.
That's counterclockwise.
Okay,
I think we
do it the other way. See?
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that cool? But to the ordinary eye, if I just showed you this,
it
stops, it goes the other direction.
Yeah.
So muons will have this property that they don't have this exact relationship that's predicted by theory. Again, this is what scientists do. They have a model for how nature should behave. We make observations. Now those observations disagree at a very significant level, such that the odds of it occurring by fluke chance is about 1 in 30 million or something like that. And so now they're saying the one way to explain it is if there's another type of boson, which would mean another type of force, which would be the fifth force for those caping score at home. So that's all that means. It doesn't mean that there's like a wormhole and that they're communicating through it. There are theories like that, but not for the muon experiment.
Okay. What do you could bring it back to the UAB thing?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going on?
Well, the Occam's razor approach is to think about it as, maybe it's a variety of sources. First of all, Grush, where is he from? What is his branch? Grush, sorry. What is he? And I'd love to talk to him. He seems like an interesting patriotic guy.
Well, he doesn't have physical experience with anything.
He doesn't even have direct eyewitness.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
He wasn't, but he's not claiming he does.
Right.
What he's claiming is that he uncovered these programs that he thinks, as a patriotic American, and as a citizen of the world, that people should know that there's crash retrieval programs and that they are in possession of biological entities that they keep in freezers.
Again, I don't want to condemn him. I don't want to have any smattering of an ad hominem attack. But I'll say one thing, and just you tell me if I'm being an a-hole, okay? He was given the opportunity on perhaps the greatest stage he'll ever have to name names and to say different things, and he didn't name them. And I've heard things from like Lou Elizondo indirectly. My friend Kurt Jamungo has talked to him many times, but I've never talked to him. But they'll say things like, I can't do that. It'll ruin my life. And look, Joe, I'm a coward compared to both of these gentlemen, right? But at a certain level, in front of senators, congressmen, women, to say like I can't disclose that, but you're a whistleblower, like you're blowing a whistle. You have protection.
Right,
we will protect you. We will defend the frick out of you.
But he's not done. What he's trying to do is get permission to discuss more things. So he has permission to say what he said so far. This is according to him. He is attempting to get permission to discuss more.
Where's my
These are the things that he could have discussed with them in the skiff. That's why he brought it up this way. He's trying to do this all by the book. And it appears that
you don't have
there's
to fucking
both
give me my zip
resistance
code,
and
goddamn.
support for this.
Well, this is the argument I had with Avi Loeb when he came on my show. He talked about this object Oumuamua, which is this interstellar object that he claims is either junk debris or maybe it's a tourist scout or a spy drone.
It's much more reflective, rather, right?
It has properties that can't be explained by the typical astronomical, pedantic ways of explaining things. And I told him when he came on my podcast, and I love Avi, I've had him on many times. I said, Avi, you happen to also be friendly, because I said, why don't you go after this thing and go track it down? Oh, no, he said. In a couple of years, one of the most ambitious and important observatories is coming online, and I'm happy to recommend people that work on it to you when it comes out, called the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, not too far from where our Simon's observatory is. And that observatory, he said, is going to capture thousands of these things, if I'm right. And I said, Avi, what if you're wrong? What if this is one-time only event? I said, Avi, I live in San Diego, and San Diego has the following properties. It's the absolute best and easiest place to be a meteorologist on the planet, except for yesterday. A freaking hurricane, and a tornado, and an earthquake. But it's the absolute worst place to be a sportscaster, because we, of all the major cities in the United States, we have never won a world championship in any sport. Okay, so it's horrible. So last year, then the Padres got into the division series, and I'm a huge Padres fan. I should not have said, well, the Padres are in the division series, even though it's the first time, since Tony Gwynn was playing, and they've been around for 55 years. I'll just wait till next year. No. I made I tried to get tickets. I scalped. I couldn't get tickets because you don't know if your calculations are correct. But if you believe in what you're saying, track this thing down. And oh, by the way, Avi, you happen to know a guy named Yuri Milner who's already paying your team and funding you, not personally. He's funding a team called the Breakthrough Starshot. Have you heard about this?
No.
They're going to send billions of little cell phone cameras to Proxima Centauri B. You're not supposed to laugh.
That sounds insane.
You're not supposed to laugh. But anyway, they're spending $100 million on it. And they're going to shoot these things there, and they'll get there in 20 years, and they'll transmit at the speed of light. It'll take another 4 years to get back to the Earth because it's 4 light years away. Instead of having him spend $100 million on that, why don't you get him to, get a little CubeSat and shoot it off and go catch up to Oumuamua while it's still in your freaking neighborhood?
So that's totally possible to do?
Totally possible. It's not
so you
impossible.
think he's resisting that because it doesn't, like, he doesn't want it to be disproven because he's getting a lot of attention off of this idea that this interstellar object is something from an alien civilization?
I think that's too venal. I don't think he's doing it for attention. I just think he's too in love with his numbers. He's too in love with his calculations.
Too in love with the idea of it.
That
But,
there's
he,
so
but he
many of
certainly, but there is there has to be a temptation to getting recognition because I had never heard of him until a few years ago, and now I hear about him constantly. He's in all these interviews, and this is not disparaging.
No, I know.
It's just that there's an impulse that people have to continue to do something that gets them a lot of recognition.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is the number one.
If it's possible to go take a look at that thing, how much would it cost to go take a look at that thing?
It would probably cost less than $1 billion, saying. And this guy that he's friends with is, and far be it for me to tell a billionaire how to spend his or her money, but I'm just saying.
I don't think you're going to talk Elon Musk into going looking at it.
Right. Well, Elon's another kid. So I know you've talked. So you have this piece of Mars, right? So he's trying to get to Mars now, right? He wants to die on Mars, and hopefully, God willing, it won't be on impact. Okay, that would be horrible if he dies on impact.
Yeah.
But Joe, have you ever thought like, which one of his 10 kids? I mean, Kanai Nahara, he's got 10 kids. Who's he gonna leave behind? Like who? Like to do that?
If he goes to Mars,
I think he's like he wants to go to Mars. He
Well,
said he wants to die on Mars.
by the time he is able to do this, they'll probably be fully grown adults. Maybe they can go visit him.
They go come with him.
Apparently, the idea is to be able to come back. Just like, okay. I saw The Martian. Did you like that?
Yeah, I love the Mars. Andy Weir is a UCSD. He didn't graduate from UCSD, but he wrote it. But yeah.
But I mean, it is possible that one day we will have the technology to colonize other planets, right?
Do we have the reason to do it, Joe?
What is the reason?
This is what I
isn't sometimes the reason just to be able to do it, or maybe to ensure that the human race survives if there's some sort of a natural disaster on Earth.
Do you know what Nixon wrote on the plaque that went to the moon on Apollo 11?
No, what?
It said, "We came in peace for all mankind." That's bullshit, right? It was a war against the Soviets. It was part of the Cold War. It was a war of propaganda, and it was important. It did a lot for science. Guess what? We haven't been back to the moon in 50 years, right? So if it was so important for peace and for technology, why haven't we been back, okay? So to say what we did, it's the Edmund Hillary thing, climb Everest because it's there, right? But Elon has said the following. He has said, I want to go to Mars so that humankind becomes interplanetary. Then you ask, I love to keep asking why questions, right? Because they're so annoying. Like your kids keep asking you why. You know what the ultimate answer
like
is.
we sent you a payment link, but we
Freaking said so. Go to sleep, right? So
I can
with
resend it.
him, I would keep
Or
asking why.
phone?
Why do you want to send people to Mars? Why should humankind be interplanetary? So that the flame of consciousness never gets extinguished. Why? Why can't you go under the ocean? Why can't you build bubble cities? Why can't you build floating cloud cities?
Well, the Earth gets destroyed.
Okay, but why?
Why what?
Why
Why continue with humanity?
not just humans? And he's talking about human consciousness, which could also mean like AI stuff or whatever. Like, but here's my bigger point. You had Ryan Holiday on recently. He's got these memento mori coins, right? Memento mori means remember you're gonna die. Allegedly, Roman emperors would have some courtesan walking next to them, so they wouldn't have too much hubris. They would say, "Remember, you're mortal. You're gonna die." That was done to motivate them to suck the marrow out of life while you're alive, right? So my question at some level is, well, is that true only of individuals? Or like, could it be true of a civilization as a whole? Could it be true that like, hey, wait, we shouldn't be dedicating all this effort. And I think it's, I wouldn't say it's as unlikely as life, having iPhones on Proxima Centauri B, but I'd say it's pretty unlikely that we're going to do that in the next 100 years to have
Touch and base,
colonized
we moved
Mars.
here in the
It's incredibly difficult from a technological standpoint, from a biological standpoint,
So
a
just
psychological
hold of you,
standpoint,
I can
the
order.
raw material. There's a tremendous number of reasons that
Sure,
it's
but
not
if
possible.
technology progresses the way it has since 1800, the way
total
it's
due is
the world's
9/7.
unrecognizable. You could conceivably say that if it continues in the same direction and we don't blow ourselves up, we may very well have the ability to do something like that.
So there's,
And if you say why,
yeah.
well, why not?
Well, why not is always a
Because
good
it's
answer.
fascinating,
Right.
because it's interesting, because people want to do it, because it would be significant to have human life living on a terraformed Mars.
Put it on our resume.
Maybe we could use Mars as like a test to like how to recharge an atmosphere if we fuck it up.
Right, but isn't it better just not to fuck it up?
Yeah, it is better not to fuck it up, but it's also interesting. Like why go to the moon? Why send
sure.
satellites up there? Why look at stars?
It's part of
Why
the
all
human-
those things? It's part of this human desire to constantly innovate and move
Absolutely.
forward.
But I question the Moore's law kind of compatibility. And actually, you talked about this with Michio Kaku, and he was in his new book about quantum supremacy, which is this kind of faith in these exponential curves. And exponential curves are really tricky mofos because they sneak up on you for a long time, like then they go like this, right? Well, one of the things that they do after they do this is they do this. They come down, right? You've heard of peak oil and stuff like that.
Right.
There's only a finite amount of oil because there's only a finite amount of pre-carbon, there's fossil fuels, et cetera, right? But it's worse than that. As we get more and more kind of technologically capable, we get better and better at keeping the Ponzi scheme going, in a sense. Like the ore grade of gold used to be like in California, 1849, right? They would stumble upon a huge brick rock of gold. That never happens anymore. The amount of gold per ton is like a gram per ton. It's incredibly small, and it's going down. All these things are going down. There are all these diminishing S-curves, they call them. They start off really high, and so you get the go-go 90, and then it drops off to zero. There's no saying that might not also happen for both extraction of resources that you need to build a colony on Mars, fuel, rocket parts, etc., but also for the coming AI and computing revolution. In other words, Moore's law is saturating for a very interesting reason. It's not that the speed of the computers is still doubling, but the amount do you care about the speed of your computer? No, you care about what I can do with it, right? How fast does the web page load up, right? Well, so you can have the fastest computer, but it's loading really slowly because there's so many other people that want to take advantage and use that same resource. It's a very highly in demand resource. Well, that will happen with quantum computing too. It's already happening with classical supercomputers. In other words, their speed is going up, but the number of floating point operations they do is saturating because so many people want to use them because they're so good. They're a victim of their own success in a certain sense. Same thing could happen with mineral. So the question is, do we get there? And if not, well, what would that mean? Would we have like a civilization existential crisis? I don't know. I really don't know.
But even all the things you just stated, isn't that just within our technological limitations as of today? And our understanding of how to put together computers, our understanding of what technology can consist of in terms of minerals, in terms of like stable materials?
Yes and no. I mean, but like I said, there's only so much carbon in the Earth. There's only so many pre-biologic fossils.
Can it be recycled? Can we find new ways to use it? Can't we figure out a way to?
Sure. Yeah, we can. Yeah. But the question is, these different things have to overlap. And actually, I just, because I kind of was interested to go back just to the UAP thing for 1 minute, which was think about the human factors involved in someone like what Grush is describing. Imagine that you have this ability to go back and start with, like, something happened in 1947 in Roswell. We'll just say something happened. It definitely happened, right? So there were some people there that witnessed something. They might have been military. They might have been research scientists. But people had to go there, identify it, notify people. Then people had to go there and pick it up, clean it up, bring it on a flatbed truck, transport it, store it, keep it processed. Then there's biologics, right? He's saying there's biologics. So the biologics had to be processed by a biologist, not by the same corpsman who collected it. And guess what? All these guys have wives or husbands or bosses or friends and stuff. So my friend James Altucher is a very big influence in my podcasting career as well. He talks about a conspiracy number. Like, what's the maximum number of people that can possibly be part of a conspiracy before it gets out? right, before it's exposed. And there's also overlap between that and their timescales, right? You're talking about a sustained conspiracy. If this is, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that this is true, and that's not, so. But this is now coming out now, and you tweeted about this, or you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago on a podcast. I forget with whom, but you said the atomic age coincided with the age of Roswell.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, and that's true. And there was another thing that happened during that age, the quantum age. So quantum mechanics, which is the discovery of forces, fields, maybe fifth forces, and unseen things, spooky action at a distance, aliens, and then the notion of atomic holocaust, etc. Right? So all these things are in the zeitgeist at that moment. And you're right, they nucleate at that same time. What if right now is also that time? But how is it? Because now we're also talking about like UAPs, fifth forces, all these other things, and now instead of the Cold War, we have a hot war, right? And all these things are united, and we have global climate change, right? I always say there's this concept called the von Karman line, which is the boundary between the Earth and the space. It's about 60 miles, 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface, and basically almost everything that we're dealing with existentially happens below that line, right? Pandemics, COVID, respiratory, atmospheric transmission, nuclear war, and the effects of such a thing on the Earth, and things in the UAP space that are happening, and the boundary between Earth and space. These are all kind of happening, and I'm wondering if it's not sort of related at some level to this kind of being in the cultural consciousness, and that's why it's all coming to date. Because to think about a conspiracy of 7 decades, maintained with probably a minimum of 1,000 people, kept secret, there's a probability of that happening, but we should be precise about it, and we should do calculate that, not dismiss it, but also be precise about it.
Well, it also depends upon what kind of people you're talking about. You know, if you're talking about only high-level military people that have a long history of being able to keep secrets, then it's a part of the culture. And these are the only people that have access to these vehicles or this thing. I could conceivably see how someone could keep something quiet for a very long time. And then you have people that have claimed to have seen these things and worked on these things. And it's always hard when you're dealing with anecdotal evidence and people discussing things, and you don't know what's true and what's not true. What is fascinating to me is have you seen the Go Fast video?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about those videos where there's no heat signature, no visible means of propulsion, and these things are whipping through the sky?
I mean, you've talked to Mick West and other people, and I'm not saying he's not a scientist in the sense that someone like I am. But some of these things are, it always comes down to like, well, whose data is it?
Right. See, these are fighter jet pilots that are seeing these things, and they're discussing it. Play that video so you could listen to their discussion of it while they're seeing this thing. Mm-hmm. What do you think it is? So when I look at those things, there's a couple of different things that you have to look at from an optical perspective, from a sensor perspective, from a... Let me hear them talk. Yeah. So right now we're looking at this video where this thing seems to be trying to tracking it. Their systems are trying to track it. So they locked onto it now. So obviously they're freaking out. Yeah, so they locked onto it with their weapon system. Yeah, so there's something called scale invariance, which is where you can't really tell in certain phenomena. Fractals are like, have you ever seen like the Mandelbrot set? So no matter how much you zoom into it or zoom out of it, it looks the same. Right. And there are lots of features like that. One of the manifestations of that is the ocean surface. There are waves on top of waves. You ever seen the beautiful Japanese woodcut where it's like wave on it? Sure. Incredible. So there you're seeing a lot of waves, but it's impossible to have any depth perception, right? Because we're only getting a single view of it. And there's a gyroscopic stabilization tool that they're using in the FLIR system that's measuring it, right? So there is a heat signature. That's how they can see it on FLIR for the forward-looking infrared. I mean, propulsion. Oh, it's universal. It's not like there's something coming out the back, like a jet engine where you can see it clearly. So there have been mock-ups and simulations done for this, where it's like you could have a balloon, you could have something spherical, or something that's actually going with the wind. Can't they detect how fast it's moving? No. So not from that video, you can't necessarily. But from their systems, from their weapon systems, they can't detect how fast. Like they are having a hard time locking onto it. So I asked Ariel Kleinerman and
Ryan about this, and they said it's classic. Like, they wouldn't tell me what their radar is capable of saying, only that they can use it to determine certain properties.
But it seemed very evident in that video that they were having a hard time catching it because it was moving at a very high rate of speed.
This is 2004, I think. This video
was that one.
Yeah.
So they're trying to lock onto this thing, and it's moving too fast. And you see the crosshairs try to keep up with it, and then finally it locks onto it, and that's when they cheer that we got it, and they say, "Look at that thing go!"
Right.
Don't you think they would have an understanding of the speed that something's moving and not think of it as a balloon that's just floating around?
Well, remember, this is stabilized, so they're locking on, so they're moving in a perspective.
Right, but don't you think their equipment has the ability to detect speed?
Do you know how big the field of view of that thing was?
I don't.
Yeah, so we don't either.
Well, I don't know if they do. I don't know if they've released how
they?
large they estimate it is.
So
I mean, this is all leaked video, right?
Right. So if you were to look through this telescope, at the moon, and there was a balloon on the telescope, floating in front of the moon, and you could see it, and it was big, and like a Chinese spy balloon or something like that, and it's moving, and you're moving, and you don't know the relative field of view compared to the size of this object. It may appear that it's going. If that thing is the size of an Embraer Air jetliner, yeah, that's freaking fast, right? If it's the size of a balloon being carried by the wind that you are stabilized as in a parcel of wind, it might not be.
But we're assuming that there's wind. We're assuming it's being carried by the wind. But we're assuming it's being carried by the wind in the same direction. We don't know which way the wind was blowing. We don't. But what my point is that they seem to think that that was very unusual. And these aren't guys that are just like, oh my God, a balloon, shoot it.
Well, that's when I went back to the feeling of pity that, and again, he doesn't even have pity, but let's say your life, you were seeing these things, and let's forget it. It's a Chinese war drone, military drone, that's coming to blow up the Nimitz, okay, or whatever they were on, okay? And so you then, your compatriot, your comrade comes back to the deck, and you put like Independence Day posters on his rug, and you've seen it too. That's not what I would do. If my kid comes to me and says, I saw, the boogeyman or something, she's like really nervous, I don't say like, well, like, let me tease her about it. Like, no, I remember.
Okay, I wouldn't do that to my kid, but I would definitely do that to my friends. If one of my friends said they saw an alien, 100%.
Oh, Joe, you would do it.
I would take a rubber alien, I'd put it in their bed, have it tucked in.
Okay.
Yeah, but just for fun. And that's what those guys were doing to him. You're making it seem like they like horribly insulted him. They were just busting balls.
Let me say this. You're a pilot. Let's say you charter a private jet sometime, okay? You're out with Lex, and you're going to Vegas, right? And you charter a private jet, right? You're on the jet. The guy who's in there is flying the plane, and you found out that he actually was an ex-military pilot, and he did see one of these things. And so you get one of your friends, your buddies, dresses up as an alien, bust into the cockpit and starts, I'm the alien that you find. You wouldn't do. I mean, that seems
like a silly comparison.
I'm just
what
making
you're
the
talking
comparison.
about is a guy
their
who
life
comes
is
back.
But if
he
their life
comes
is
back
really
from a
threatened.
flight claiming to have seen UFOs and his friends bust his balls.
This happened many times.
But that's in the military. That's
I know.
normal military shit.
But Ryan's saying the
hanging out
opposite
together.
now. Ryan's saying no. These people are scared for their safety now. Now he's doing the Americans for Safe Aerospace, that he has to be, and it's part of their mission is to protect pilots
This is
and
because of close
destigmatize them.
encounters with these things,
And
right?
destigmatize.
This is the square in a circle.
The cube around a sphere.
Is it a cube around a sphere?
It's
Is that
the
what
other
it
way.
is?
It could be.
Which way is
on
it?
my
Is it
website.
a black cube
It's
that's
on my
in
video.
a sphere?
I made a very expensive thumbnail for my video with Ryan Graves.
A sphere inside a cube?
Yeah.
So this sphere inside a cube is a repeating theme, right? They see a lot of these.
On the East Coast.
On the East Coast.
Yeah, on the West
So
Coast.
do you think these things are drones? What do you think these things are?
Well, do you remember the Chinese spy balloon, that came about recently? And do you remember how we didn't shoot it down?
Yeah.
And do you remember when that came about? It was like right before this disclosure was about to get kicked off. I mean, there's some weird things that are going on. There's certainly things.
You connect those two things together, one thing that moves in a very bizarre way that they can't seem to replicate. They don't know how these things like stay stable at 120 knots.
Well, this
according to all of his equipment, unless their equipment totally sucks, and this is like the equipment that got upgraded in 2014.
Right, but then they say, I can't tell you about the equipment. And
Right,
So
but they can tell you that when the equipment was upgraded, that's when they started detecting these things. So if the equipment is accurate and the equipment is upgraded and then they put it on these jets and these guys are detecting these things, and then there's visual confirmation of these things by multiple pilots, and it's a reoccurring thing. They see them in the same areas all the time.
Well, then why wouldn't the government go out Why wouldn't they be sending out? I asked Ryan that. I said, why don't they send out sorties every day if they're doing it at nothing less? They could
Because
do it
maybe
for
it's
training.
theirs.
You're right. It could be.
Maybe
right?
it's theirs.
I-
U.S. shoots down another flying object over Canada.
6
What they
months
shoot?
ago.
What they shoot
They
down?
didn't say.
This is the.
I'm sure that. Well, I had Mike Baker on, who used to be with the
Yeah,
CIA. And
that's
he was
right.
explaining all these Chinese balloons.
Oh,
that
this
they-
was from Eric Weinstein shared this yesterday. He said
Ah.
there's these 3 different, on the screen, there's a map of 3 different NORAD shots that happened. This is from time. And
Yeah.
like, he
Wow.
just says, like, I don't remember these happening. Do
You know how much each one of those missiles cost, by the way?
No.
It's over $1 million.
Didn't they miss once?
Yep.
Haha.
Because you're not like shooting
Where'd
at
that fucking missile go?
these balloons that people don't realize that when you're at altitude, it's not like this. So
Right.
like the pressure outside is almost equal to the pressure inside. So if you shoot it like with bullets and pepper it with a bullet, it does nothing. It's just like opening a door in a warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like detach it from the payload. That's why they shot it with a missile.
Oh wow.
So those are $1 million a pop. But I wanted to just get back to the
possibility of what they are.
the possibility of what they are. So I always have to look for the simplest explanation of what they could be, and certainly the simplest. I don't think anyone would disagree. The simplest explanation is certainly not. These are interdimensional beings that have traveled across the literal equivalent of trillions upon trillions of miles, or if you like, thousands of light years or millions of light years, as objects, only to navigate that whole way and end up being sighted off of Catalina Island and Newport News, or Virginia.
Maybe they don't care if they get sighted. Maybe that's part of their fun.
But yeah, right. So then there's a teleological explanation. We're trying to propose a mechanism by which that motivates some species or something to do that, right? Now, Avi, to get back and give him his credit, because I don't want to be perceived as I'm denigrating him in any way, but he has built this Galileo project. And I should say, I never got interested in any of this stuff, Joe. Although I do think if it were true, you know who should be the most interested in it are physics professors and physics researchers, right? Because if this is true that they have mastered, there are creatures that mastered the interdimensional manipulation of space-time, that would shortcut me and my colleagues 4 or 5 centuries, right? And it would be just a revolution. Think of the Nobel Prizes you could win, right?
Right.
Think of tenure. You could get
If
tenure.
you were allowed to have access to it.
Right.
If they do have some sort of a back engineering program, who could conceivably be qualified to do that?
This is where I disagree with Eric. I always say Eric, Eric is my atomic clock. They say like a broken clock's right twice a day. Like Eric's almost always right. He's in my atomic clock, so I get a great deal from Eric. But when he says that these objects that we need, where are the theoretical physicists studying this? I claim you don't really need theoretical physicists to study it yet. You might instead want experimental physicists such as myself and my colleagues, people that are used to dealing with data, with sensors, with actually building technology, observing things, again, observing the skies. We've been watching the skies in all wavelengths. By the way, you only see it with like visible light. How come these aren't showing up only in the radar microwave region of the spectrum, infrared? Why would they choose the narrow band of wavelengths that some marginal species of primitive apes, evolved apes have sensitivity to, namely this narrow window? This is infinitesimal.
You're saying, why wouldn't they hide themselves?
Why wouldn't there be other modalities in which they're observed other than visible sightings, eyewitness sightings? Which, in other words, why couldn't they manipulate the signatures that they travel in? Maybe they'd be neutrinos. Maybe they could be using gravitational waves. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But that you don't need Edward Witten to help you with, right? You don't need a theoretical physicist. You need an experimental physicist, an observational astronomer who's used to looking through telescope. My whole job, Joe, is staring up at the sky with things like this in all different dimensions and looking for objects that don't seem to make sense, or looking for phenomena that have never been observed
But
before.
why would you assume that they would want to hide?
I'm not saying they would want to hide. I'm just saying they
Why
seem
would
to be
they-
evasive, right? So in other words, they're